Did you know that there was a time when the Agojie met the canons of Abeokuta? This was one of the most determined attempts to conquer Abeokuta, led by King Ghezo of Dahomey, whose elite all-female warriors, the Agojie, once marched across the forest of Yoruba land with the intention of turning the Egba people into slaves. Between 1843 and 1851, the Dahomey kingdom, under the fiery reign of King Ghezo, launched several brutal invasions into Egba territory. But in Abeokuta, they met something that they had never seen before: a city united by desperation, strategy, and cannon fire. This is the story of the Egba-Dahomey War and how a city carved from exile stood against one of the fiercest armies in West Africa. In the mid-19th century, the kingdom of Dahomey stood as one of the most powerful and feared militaries in West Africa. With an economy fueled by warfare and the Atlantic slave trade, Dahomey thrived on conquest. At the center of this machine was King Ghezo, a bold, politically shrewd monarch who had modernized his army and placed his trust in one of the fiercest military units the world had ever seen, the Agojie, the all-female fighters known in the West as the Dahomey Amazons. By the 1840s, Dahomey had expanded aggressively. Ghezo's interest had turned eastward to the growing town of Abeokuta, newly founded by Egba refugees who had fled the collapse of Old Oyo. Abeokuta, carved into stone and protected by the natural fortress of Olumo Rock, was rising in power, and more importantly to Ghezo, it stood in the way of Dahomey's control of inland trade routes. The Egba people who built Abeokuta were not warriors by profession. They were farmers, traders, hunters, and survivors. After being driven from their homelands during the Oyo Civil Wars, they had found safety in the rocky terrain along the Ogun River. Olumo Rock, a towering limestone monolith, provided both a natural defense and a spiritual anchor. Leaders like Sodeke, Oshodi, Balogu Ogumbono, and Sokenu began to turn Abeokuta from a refugee settlement into a defensible town. They built walls, dug trenches, and constructed makeshift watchtowers. Cannonry had also arrived through missionary contacts and foreign trade. Egba blacksmiths learned quickly. They adapted. They built defenses not with the force of numbers, but with ingenuity. Beneath the shadow of Olumo Rock, they readied their people, not for raids, but for war. Women gathered herbs to make poisons and poultices. Children were taught to carry bullets and pass water to warriors. Hunters were drafted as sharp shooters. It was not a professional army, but a city with no option but to survive. In 1843, King Ghezo sent his first expedition. It was a probing mission, small, strategic. The Egba resisted. The Dahomey warriors retreated, but not without taking captives and slaughtering scouts. Over the next few years, the confrontations grew. By 1851, King Ghezo launched the most serious offensive, an all-out campaign to break Abeokuta and seize control of the trade routes. Thousands of soldiers marched from Abome with the Agojie at the forefront. These women were rigorously trained, hardened by years of battle, and feared even by Dahomeyan men. They marched barefoot, machetes at their hips, eyes fixed on the eastern frontier. They had never been turned back. The Agojie struck with terrifying speed, cutting down Egba farms on the outskirts of Abeokuta. Yam barns were burnt, scouts were killed. They pushed deep into the surrounding villages, determined to cripple food supplies and intimidate the defenders. But the Egba did not scatter. From within Abeokuta, Sodeke organized a defense. His forces did not meet the Dahomey army in open field. They let them come. Hidden cannons were mounted behind stone walls. Trenches disguised with thatch were dug around the main gates. Women boiled palm oil and prepared hot ash to pour from above. Hunters climbed into the trees with muskets and poisoned arrows. When the Agojie attempted to breach the city, they were met with something new. Not just resistance, but artillery. The first cannon blasts shook the trees. A Dahomey unit was blown apart. Another cannon, mounted near the foot of Olumo Rock, opened fire. Smoke engulfed the forest edge. Horses screamed. Agojie formation broke. For the first time in decades, the Agojie pulled back. Dahomey's advance slowed. King Ghezo, watching from his encampment, was unprepared for this level of resistance. More than military strategy, the Egba seemed spiritually fortified. Their priests had consecrated the cannons with rituals. Oriki were sung over bullets. The city did not just fight, it resisted with its soul. Egba women stood beside men. Old hunters who had fought in Oyo's fall led the younger ones. Cannons rang at dawn, noon, and dusk. Agojie warriors, though fearless, began to suffer heavy losses. Some accounts say that over 500 Dahomey soldiers died during the siege, many of them Agojie. The Agojie fought to the gates, scaling barricades, but each time the cannon fire forced them back. A turning point came when Egba commanders tricked the Agojie into attacking a false well, behind which two cannons lay in wait. The trap was devastating. Bodies were scattered across the bush path. Dahomeyan morale began to falter. This attack had lasted several days. At night, the Dahomey army tried to regroup, but the longer they remained, the more vulnerable they became. Egba guerrilla fighters launched night raids, setting fire to supply lines. Youth crept into enemy camps and stole food. Dahomey was fighting a city it could not understand. Flexible, hidden, and relentless. King Ghezo had no choice. He gave the order to retreat. The Agojie left behind dozens of their own. The path they had cleared into Egba territory was littered with the dead. The same warriors who had terrorized the coasts of West Africa were now forced to withdraw, not by another empire, but by a city of displaced people who refused to fall. The victory at Abeokuta sent ripples across Yoruba land. For the first time, the myth of Dahomey's invincibility was broken. The Egba people had defended more than just a city. They had defended an idea that autonomy could be won through unity, that women and men could fight side by side, that rocks, if rooted in resolve, could break steel. King Ghezo would never again attack Abeokuta, and within Abeokuta, songs were composed. They sang of Balogun Ogunbono, whose cannon fire rang like thunder. They praised Sodeke, who strategized like a king. They remembered Sokenu, whose calm planning held the city's core. They honored the mothers who cooked, healed, and threw fire from the walls. Today, Olumo Rock still stands in the heart of Abeokuta. It is more than a tourist site. It is a monument to survival. The Egba Dahomey War was not just a battle of armies. It was a war of identity, land, and freedom. It proved that courage is not measured by numbers or empire, but by how far a people will go to defend their future. When the Agojie met the cannons of Egba, the forest held its breath, and Abeokuta did not fall.